Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are from. I'm very happy to see you guys again on our webinar series. So my name is Wojciech Ozimek. I'm a founder of Rockanan Group, which is boutique company helping product managers all around the world. But as you may know, that one of our major missions is actually help out managers in audio and electronic consumer electronics industries, music tech industries. So this is why I have a great pleasure today, introduce to you like a great guest from Montreal, Canada, Simon Ashby, who is co-founder and VP of product in company that you should know, Audiokinetic. But I'm not going to make more introduction. Simon, if I can ask you to say hello and maybe say a few words about you.
Yes, well, thanks for inviting me. I'm used to do presentation and webinars talking about dynamic audio and that kind of thing, but it's the first time I'm going to have a discussion about portfolio management and development of tools and so on. So that's a novelty for me. So I'm quite excited by that.
Great.
Yeah. So and maybe one thing. So my title changed a few years ago. So it's now head of product instead of VP product.
Great. It's actually less corporate, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's 5 years ago. Audiokinetic has been acquired by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and they said that vice president are for Sony Corporation and so on. So nobody can have the term president or vice president inside Audiokinetic. So that's when it changed to head of product.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you for clarification. Like Simon already mentioned, the title of the webinar is actually Managing Complex Audio Portfolio, because while you will actually learn during this webinar that Audiokinetic has very interesting tools, of course, Wise, the flagship product, but also there are other tools, and obviously there are complementary tools. Never actually probably with any product. You just don't do small. I mean, it's all start with small things, but while it grows complicated, and this is what we are going to touch today. But before we start, first of all, I wanted to ask where you are guys from, because so what country or city you are from. That's why we will know actually that you can hear us and see us well. So we can post like a town or a country you are from. We'll be able to say hello. Oh, hey. Yes, I can see that we are heard and seen. At least that we know.
Yeah.
So guys, if you could just say that, where are you from, and small introduction to the agenda. So at first, Simon will talk a little bit about introduce Audiokinetic and products, set certain context so we know what we are talking about, right? To those who don't know, because I know that Canada, Vancouver. Hello. So yes, London, great. So yes. So first of all, we'll set the context. Then we'll have a discussion actually about those challenges. We'll simply have a informal conversation chat, hopefully interesting for you guys, and we'll obviously read and register all the questions, but we won't be answering them like Brazil. Wow, great, thank you so much. So we'll just leave like a quarter, maybe 20 minutes at the end. Hopefully we will not go over. I have this tendency to talk like crazy, but we have a gatekeeper behind the scene. Oh, hello. I suppose from the name Poland, Polish gaming industry. Welcome. So that's the plan. So like an introduction, discussion, and questions at the end. We'll try to answer them. Of course, if we don't manage to answer all the questions, feel free to reach out to us or leave them on the LinkedIn. We'll just pass them to Simon, and hopefully we'll ask Simon to, if he'll be able to maybe answer if there will be some interesting questions that we couldn't answer. Okay, so with this said, Simon, the floor is yours. So maybe you could just start by India. Hello, India.
Wow.
Great.
Okay. That's really
all around the world.
Webinar just there. That's great. Okay. Well, thanks again for inviting me doing that. So because Audiokinetic, what we produce, Wise, a middleware, more recently Strata. It's a bit of a different type of product than what we're used to if you're used to work with DAWs and VST plugins, for example, or hardware, so which are better understand because there's so many people doing music or film and things like that. But doing interactive audio for games and other real-time applications requires a different type of tools because you're not in control of the storytelling. You're not in control of what's happening. This is the actual players that will dictate, how things are unfold and how fast or slow things are arriving. And there might be portion of the games that are never visited by some people and other portion by other people. So you need a different approach, a different mindset, and a different set of tools as well to cover those needs. So what I have a presentation there just to basically introduce you to, the scope and where do we operate and some of the differences. And I believe that will be useful for the discussion to happen after that. So that's the plan, but it's not the main highlight per se. It's not a presentation, it's the discussion that we want to focus on.
Yeah. If I may just interject, I think, while preparing to the webinar was also kind of interesting because of one case, of course, on one hand, we're talking about the portfolio and product management, so how those tools are built. But I saw that there is a lot of sound engineering people also registered to the webinar. So, that's I'm sure that we'll have also some questions around, maybe trends in audio, etc. But yeah, that's that was I was saying. Hey, so what kind of questions we may get? That's gonna be interesting. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So I welcome all those questions, and we might not have answers for all of that, but hey, that's it. We'll try to answer as much as we can and go from there. So we are Audiokinetic. That's the company that we created. I started presenting, but I don't see the deck right now. Here it is. So there's a little delay. Great. So Audiokinetic is the name of the company, and it's been I think I have a timeline for that. So we'll hey, next slide. What a great timing. So it's been incorporated in 2000. And there's been a lot of thinking and planning and try to conceive what could be a tool for interactive audio. And that went up to 2003 before we got both, the technical plan and the business plan to make that our full-time job, because I was still working at Ubisoft in Montreal as a sound designer or an audio director at the time. And we spent 3 years to develop and release the first version of Wise. So it arrived in 2006. And from there, we had our first games and we got this evolution. Eventually, traveling from Montreal to Japan all the time was a bit taxing, and the cultural aspect, the language, and so on. So opening an office in Tokyo was the thing to do. Later, a few years later, same thing in Shanghai, and last year in Hilversum, which is just nearby Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. So that's where I tried to go fast on those slides. I want to focus on the discussion.
But I'm just reading like 100 game, 50, 500,000, and I say,
exactly. So there's some sort of exponential curve there. And 5 years ago, after having our first investors in the company with us for something like 14 or 15 years, and they never saw any return on their investment because any profit was reinvested in the company, in the product, hiring people. So they wanted an exit, and we didn't want to just sell the company. We wanted to find a partner that could help us actually accelerating our goal, and that. And it took a while to find the right partner, and eventually Sony Entertainment, Interactive Entertainment. So that's a branch that is responsible for PlayStations and all the games, part of Sony Corporation, right? It's one of the big division with their music division, film, and so on. So that's where we're at. And since the very beginning, our product was Wise, and this is the runtime aspect. This is the tool in which you author your structure, your behaviors, and so on. And at runtime, playing on the gaming platforms or your phone or your PC, you've got a runtime version of Wwise executing the soundtrack in real time. And more recently, we introduced Strata, which is more the content aspect and the content. So it's a library of sound effects in which the way it's been designed and developed, it's really meant for interactive audio. So now I like to think about our yin and yang, and we have this completion between content and the engine playing that content. So I'll just few slides on Strata and few slides on Wwise after. So as I was saying, it's a sound effect library. So there's plenty of sound effects library out there. But this one, so other libraries, typically you just have your sounds, and from the rendered sounds, a lot of time you need to, cut aspects or do some frequency, mingling, and basically you have to sculpt that sound to make it sound the way you want. So with Strata, of course, we distribute those rendered sound, but the magic is that we distribute the multi-track project that's been used to create that sound. Because and if you're not an audio person or you've never done sound design, maybe it's not that intuitive, but it's really rare that you capture a sound in nature and you play that directly. Typically, anything you hear in a film or in a game, there's a lot of sounds assembled together and mix and process. And
procedural audio, right? Is it
right?
Procedural audio?
Oh, there could be procedural audio as well, but I'm just talking sometimes you want to make, a sound effect, whatever type of sound effects, and it's a combination of sounds that are mixed together. So just to give you an example of that, I've got this short video. So this is the sound of a magic fireball explosion. Okay, so that can be a sound needed for your game. And the first playback you'll hear is all the layers together. So what you expect as the final sound, but then you'll see in isolation those layers added there. And this is just to give you an idea of how sound design is made typically. So what is interesting with having the full multi-track aspect is sometimes if you don't like the flamethrower layers in there, or doesn't make sense with the picture or the type of objects you're manipulating, when you just have the rendered file, it's quite difficult to just isolate that gray layer over there, right? You need to process it in many ways, and a lot of time it's just not possible. So you have to spend a lot of time researching other sources and so on, where here you could just say, okay, I'm going to mute this layer, render these sounds, and it's done. Or what we do a lot in video game is maybe the first 3 layers together fit as one entity, and the other 3 tracks may be rendered independently, and then at runtime, these 2 sounds will be played when there's a magic fireball explosion, but maybe the second layer will be affected by, how much health you still have, or is it are you surrounded by a lot of enemy, or the time of the day, or any variable that a game can have may influence the mix dynamically at runtime of how that sound should be played. So when you have all the layers independent, it makes that really easy to do. So, and having a lot of variation is important. So any sound that we distribute, we have 6 variations as a minimum. And for a certain type of sound, it can go up to 16 or even 18 variations. Like footsteps, you need a lot of variation. So you're going to have regions, and all these regions also have their various layers. So you've got a lot of flexibility to render your content. And it's a library, so we try to cover what is used in many games. So ambient sounds and combat and character and objects and transport, and all these collections basically have been authored with this flexibility in mind, having a lot of variations and having on the horizontal axis, multiple layers for that. And if you're interested, we've got a couple of free collections available, and there's a third one coming in 2 weeks as well. So if you just want to have a glimpse for that, before getting into the full thing. So that's the content aspect. Now, Wise. And nowadays, so we started in 2006, so it's been 18 years that we're there. So we started with the gaming industry and real-time media in mind, because it was mostly what was there at the time. And we have location-based entertainment, and we've got now automotive as well. So those are the main market segments where Wise is used. And for gaming, so we've got from the biggest AAA developers down to the smallest indie developers. And this is really important to us to have a representation everywhere, because they have different needs. And being in contact and close to these various studios, we're exposed to those needs and making sure that we introduce the right features and the right workflow into the product for that. And location-based entertainment, what is happening is now more and more, if you visit Universal or Disney, theme parks, up to recently, everything was static, like a film, and you're part of that. But more and more nowadays, they introduce moments where you have to do something. So they force you to interact with the scene. So in that case, depending how the groups reacts, well, the experience has to adapt to that, which is typically what video game is doing, right? So what kind of tools do they use when they do that? Well, they use game engines, and they use sound engines like Wise to make that. So we have more and more of these theme parks where now Wise is used on some of their attractions in there. And really recently, after 7 or 8 years working and adapting Wise for the automotive sectors, so there's a lot of things going on, but there's one model that we can reveal publicly because now it's in pre-order, and that vehicle will be available, I think, October or November of this year. So we're going to have our first vehicle with Wise running in it. So the Wise Foundation, so I was mentioning there's the runtime aspect. So this is the Wise being able to run on Android, on iOS, on Mac, on PC, on gaming platform, and VR devices. That's really important. And the ability to integrate Wise into game engines like Unity and Unreal that are really popular and well adopted. There's Godot in the Rising, that's an open source game engine. And there are still a lot of proprietary game engines out there. So large company can afford to have a team dedicated in making their tools and other teams using the game engine to make games, which was the scenario for everyone 20 years ago. But now there are commercial game engines like Unity, Unreal, Godot. So a lot of studios prefer to just license that technology and start building a game from scratch instead of building the tools and then build a game. So the runtime is the execution, it's the playback, the sound engine playing, but the authoring tool is the portion where you author those sound structures, you put behaviors to your sound, you determine what should be the dynamic mixing rules, So, for example, in a film, a critical dialogue, that's important that you hear what is said. So the mixer will make sure that the music ducks down and there's no explosion, and and they will make sure that you hear loud and clear any dialogue during the movie. But in a game, you never know when the dialogues will be triggered and what is happening during that dialogue. So you need to make sure that it will be audible, but you don't know how and when exactly. So that's why you need to set up dynamic mixing rules to make sure that you're going to have that clarity, even though you don't know exactly how it will happen for every player playing those things. So that's one example for this. And finally, the whole ecosystem of partners. So we've got plugin partners, for example, and we've got other integrations and so on. And how do we, or why do we onboard partners with us in that? It's when they bring things like audio transformation or special DSP that is useful, or when they solve a difficult problem, like reproducing a car engine sound in a video game where you can drive a car. This is probably one of the most difficult aspects to do it right. And we've got one of our partners that specializes just in that. Their plugin generates car engine sounds, and it sounds really fat and engaging. So great. So we will help them onboarding, getting their technology in Wise, and that helps the game developers using it. So we're basically solving problems or help them solving some of those problems, and workflow enablement and simplification, that kind of thing. Of course, there are our users that are super important, and we try to be in sync as much as possible with them. And this is just a map of people logging there. So it's interesting to see where our community is. We need to make some progress in Africa, but well, we're getting there. And finally, there's all the knowledge transfer. So interactive audio and real-time audio, that's a novelty, right? Cinema has sound for, I don't know, 70 years, probably, maybe more than that. Video game only started existing 50 years ago, and we start having good tools in the last 2 decades. But it's still a novel media, and it's a media where the author is not in control of the story he's telling. No, you write a book, you write a song, you write a film, you're in control of every variable. You create a game, there's a million person playing your game, there's a million ways of playing that game, of telling that story. So it's much more complex. So sharing knowledge, sharing good practices, sharing tips and tricks and optimizations and things like that has been at our core since the beginning of Wwise. Like, we released the first version, we already had everything documented, but we also had some sample projects, and soon enough we had some sort of a documentation to help you creating a fictional game, and eventually we had real games and so on. And
if I can interrupt you, I think if I can interrupt you, just wanted to tell you that I just recently, after talking to you, realized how complex this is, because I was just mixing the album recently. I mean, not me, a mixer for me, mixing traditional music with a couple of tracks, and having this, layers that create some, clipping and, like a, and I say, gee, now we're talking about such a complexity, and how this can be done that, still the sound is of a good quality. If, even if you have 3 tracks and, sort of static, linear sort of mixing, still this can be such a problem. The mixer actually was, hammering my head, say, why can you just compose such a complex music, right, that I cannot mix, right?
Yeah.
So, I just realized this after talking to you. What kind of complexity are we talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this level of complexity, and there's another axis of complexity where you are operating with limited resources. So there's a limited amount of memory you can use for audio on your game system, a limited amount of CPU. So you have to execute and trigger, dozens, if not hundreds of sounds without using more than 10% or 20% of the CPU, and maybe 50 megs of RAM for the entire soundtrack. So that introduced another angle where, okay, how do you optimize? How much do you compress your sounds using codecs and things like that? And that impacts the quality. So what do you do about that? And so, yes, it's a fascinating field, though, because it's like you need to master everything that a film mixer or a music composer or music engineer understands and masters. And then you need to master the interactivity and real-time aspects with all the software engineering complexity that comes with it. So it's a bit geek, but it's really engaging, and it's really fascinating because no one has the answer. There's no one answer to all those problems. It's just you play with variables and you try to make the best out of that with the team that you have, because nobody do that in isolation. It's always a team of 15, 20, 100, 500 people working together to produce a game. So it's quite a fascinating field. So we created certification eventually as we matured and we grew up as a company. So that's another question, Wojtek, where are we considering that as a product? So maybe that could be something we discuss. But that enables, so at first in 2006, we were mostly producing that content and people were in contact with that. But eventually more and more schools started to teaching interactive audio, and they had our material to use that they could adapt and, or use as is or adapt to teach. And now we have a series of institutions that are well engaged teaching interactive audio using Wwise, certified instructors. There's a lot of users that are certified, and other products or efforts we're doing in sharing the knowledge is, publishing blog articles that sometimes we write, but a lot of time is the community writing those articles, sharing, a discovery, creating that game with music, how to, make it XYZ and things like that. And they share with the community. It's a great place where people are sharing their experience and their best practices. And now we're translating that content in 5 languages. So you may have a Japanese person writing something and it's translated to Korean or English or Mandarin. And basically we're trying to get people closer together. So another product that we have is the Audiokinetic launcher. So that's our download manager and installer. So it's used to download the Wise versions, the Unity or Unreal integrations, or the Strata collections, and that's, we're surfacing as well article and things like that with that. So that's not something we sell, but that's something we need to develop and maintain so that people can easily install Wise and use it. Okay, so that's a portrait of the situation where we're at. And now let's look inside Audiokinetic in terms of the production, how we split the team. So the production team, we've got 5 teams working on Wise actively. So the Wise core team is the team responsible for the sound engine, the runtime, the execution on all the platform. And the integration team, they do our Unity and Unreal integration. And the experience team develops the user interface and the user experience. And we have a team called the Framework UI because we started coding Wise 21 years ago. And we use Windows, Microsoft MFC as the UI framework for that, because at the time, everybody was on PC only. And that was one of our first mistakes, right? Because the Mac kind of surfaced later, and now there's a lot of people using Mac. So if we want to be native on Mac, currently we're using a Windows emulator on Mac to make it happen, but we need to be native eventually, and we need a more modern UI framework so that we can have a better user experience. So there's a team working on that for many years already, and we still have 2 years maybe in front of us to complete that work. But we'll eventually be fully cross-platform and offer a much better experience and just more eye candy as well and more beautiful aspect. The Wise Acoustics team, so that's using or the geometry of the game, rooms and portals, and basically emulating acoustics as in real life. And when I say as in real life, like in real life, there's acoustics, and typically it sounds from average to poor, except if you go in a concert hall or a music studio, maybe, but in your typical living room, it's not that good. So we're not trying to mimic real life. We're basically giving tools so that if it's important for the project they work on, this team can dial real life, and that's fine, but they can also making it more, creative or fantasy and so on. Whatever aesthetics they want to develop, they have the tools to do that. But in terms of feeling that you're immersed in a game, when you use the geometry and you have dynamic early reflections and you have sounds crossing, from a room to another via the doors and the windows that are open, it's really fantastic. Like, that's really the next level in terms of audio production, where, okay, I feel that I'm part of this environment for real. And if you do that for VR experiences, then you're really into it. So anyway, so that's why we have a team dedicated for that. We have our special projects team that is responsible for Strata development, but also onboarding our partners' plugins and some custom development. We have an R&D team as well. So we're of course we're looking into machine learning and AI these days, but also spatial audio and other type of advanced DSP. There we have many games using Wise, so we need customer support, make sure that they're not blocked at any level. We have a team of very strong support people, so we level 1 and level 2, but sometimes it's software development, so sometimes the problem is really deep and we have to rely on the Wise core team or the integration team, like the people that actually wrote that code needs to jump in sometime. all these teams are supported by our QA team for quality assurance. And we've got also our team for Wise Automotive, and a team for the web, everything we do on the web, and our launcher, the download and install manager. We've got tools and automation because we need to build Wise against all the gaming platform that have different SDK versions, for example. So it has to be every day we're building Wise on many configurations out there. So and all these people are supported by the IT team to make sure that our servers work and things like that. And of course, there's marketing and finance and all that. But in terms of production, that's how we're organized. Just a few slides. I'm almost over, and then we go to the to the discussion.
Well, we may actually not have time enough for the discussion.
Okay, so we're maintaining multiple versions of Wise, and new versions, of course. So that's important. And that was my last slide. So yeah, that's it. That's it for my part.
Listen, I had so many questions already, but I didn't want to interrupt because I wanted everyone. We have like a very, how to say, I think different audience. So there are people who are sound engineers, who probably know Wise and use it. I mean, I obviously learn a little bit, and I actually, as you know, use a little bit of spatial audio, so it was super interesting for me. But yeah, I say, well, if I start asking you questions in the meantime, in the middle, I will probably talk for 2 hours.
Yeah,
but it's actually very interesting. This is also why I wanted to talk to you, because I realized that actually right now, just from Wise, actually it become like a complete ecosystem. So you understand that adding strata was actually the intention behind this, was actually to create like a end-to-end experience, right, for the sound designers. Or
so what is interesting is in our business plan, like before we actually started working full time on that, we had an Audiokinetic production team or division. So having the audio content was always there as something necessary, but it took about 20 years before we started this thing.
Wow.
In part because doing real-time technology is really difficult. So we had to focus on that, and we started like any new company, like as a startup. Like we were not funded by Silicon Valley and we get billions of dollars. That was basically connections and people we knew around us, and we had just enough money to start that thing. And so limited team, and we had to focus on the real-time technology.
And how many people are there right now in the company?
So currently we're a bit above 100. So we almost doubled during the pandemic, which is ironic. Like you don't see people in person, but you double the company.
So yeah, play a little bit more, right? Perhaps during the pandemic as well, right?
Maybe the video game industry has made a lot of money during that time because yes, people had more time to play, for sure.
True. So listen, so I just wonder, so what are the, how many product managers do you have on the team? So reporting to you, because I believe they report to you, right?
Yes. So yeah. And so we have 2 product owners. So one is responsible for anything web, because that's its own, business logic as well. And there's a lot going on there. And one for Strata, because it's so specific. And because it's something new we started after so many years, so we needed somebody responsible for that. And for Wise, we have one product manager. It's Damien that I was referring to doing the long form video to you earlier. And there's me around. So only 4 people with product in their title. And it's, in a typical company, it will not be enough probably because of everything we do. And the reason for that is, if you remember when I shown the production team, we've got different teams doing Wise. And what's happening is the team leads that we have are the same people that were with us 15 years ago. It's basically the same people since the beginning, and we just add more people to that thing. Of course, there's a bit of movement, but in general, so we have people that's been with us 15 years, 18 years, 12 years. So they're really into it. They understand, the matrix and everything a lot, and a lot of time they're in the best position to maybe not come up with the full design, but they have a really good vision for how to implement what we need to do. So product people will be more into gathering, the needs and what people are requesting, and making sure, and we say, okay, we need to do something better with this type of thing. And then we will sit down with the team's lead, discuss those things. But as product people, we don't need to go into the fine details of how to implement it exactly. And so they know better a lot of time, right? Or just having that discussion. And what I realized over time, that's also the formula or the magic or the result of keeping your people forever, or maybe not forever, but for a long period of time.
What you're saying, it sounds say so much about the company and the culture, right? That people, so congratulations. That's so great.
Exact. So we keep our people engaged with that because they have their voice and they have their say, and they have a lot of autonomy as well in doing what they're doing. And so overall, for me, a lot of time, it's mostly to guide the general direction, or sometimes just making sure that our priorities are right and so on.
So portfolio management, right? So what kind of projects to take, right?
Exact. So, and what projects not to take.
By the way, Simon, if I may just interject for just a second, and I just wanted to tell everyone who's in the call, actually, who are from, like a product folks, especially from audio industry, but not only, for software and for electronics as well. We're just at the end of the September, very close to September, teach a very small micro learning, I would say, class on product portfolio management. And obviously for all those people who are on this webinar, there is like a big discount, 10% off. I'll be teaching this class with the very, very special guy also, who is the inventor of this microphone that you can see behind me, a spatial audio microphone, Ambisonics microphone. So it's actually a good class because it's really taught by people who build products from ground up, and also audio products and software and hardware. So by practitioners for practitioners, right? So guys, I'm so happy if you join us. But this is just like a small ad, hopefully interesting for you. So that's exactly that's exactly my point, right? That's actually very hard sometimes if people want to make it all, right? And we have to sometimes cut which project not to take. So do you have like some kind of your own way to do it, or like do you use some tools or framework? How do you sort of analyze what how to build your sort of strategy, right? What projects not to take?
The strategy, or we're not big enough, or we don't have that many product that we need tools to see things. So we have and because we have the same people mostly working all those times, so we know the topics of interest, and or where we have more weaknesses and places to improve. So but what will happen, for example, sometimes we have a game developer coming to us saying, oh, we need that feature, and it's so important for us, like we would like to contract you so that you can develop that feature for Wise. So that could be interesting because here's a potential source of revenue, and it's always interesting on one end, but is it the right thing to do? So because short term, okay, that might be interesting, but is it the right thing to do? And there's different criteria for that. So first of all, if the feature they're requesting doesn't really fit with the rest of Wise, then it doesn't make sense. It will make sense for them for that game, but it doesn't make sense for anybody else. So just with that base, we'll say, oh, we won't do that, basically, or at least we'll try work with them, saying, okay, what are your actual needs? What are you trying to accomplish? And maybe we can do it another way that will make sense with the rest of the feature set. So there is that. There is also a lot of time they need it for next month. But we cannot deliver that necessarily in that version for next month. We're already committed and so on. So we can say, okay, we could start in 9 months working on that, and that will be with the next major release. So in 18 months, maybe, is it still working with your plan and your schedule? A lot of time it doesn't.
Yeah,
So,
Simon,
so
if can I just go back to because you mentioned that doesn't go with the vision. So I understand that from that you do have you got. I'm not sure if it's just written down or this is just your domain. There is actually vision where you want to be, right? In the let's say it's not just that you're just going from one release to another. You're keeping some
oh
kind
yeah,
of
yes, yes, yes,
strategy.
and that, oh yeah. So we have, and we try to make it diligently, like an organized company, where we say, okay, we've got a 5-year plans, we've got a vision for that, and then we track every year where we're at with this. Of course, during that time, things moves around, new priorities. You've got
Mhm.
2 new platforms, surprise arrives, and for us, at least for our, not for us, but for our audience, game developers, for example, if there is a new platform, they need to release their game on that platform.
Yeah.
Right, typically because they invest maybe 30 millions, 100 millions on a game. They need that game on every gaming platform possible just to reduce their risk and make sure that they can be profitable eventually with that.
Of
So a
course.
new platform equals we need to support that platform ASAP. So sometimes, okay, we had plans and then we say, oh, okay, that new platform, this is the priority now. So
Gotcha.
there's a bit of that where jokers that you just have to deal with. But yes, we have a goal for where we want to go, and that goal, it's a shared goal with where the industry is going, the discussions we have with our users, and how we see things evolving. So it's not just us, isolated with a vision. That vision is informed by our audience, of
Gotcha,
course.
gotcha. Listen, I just wanted to have us, once again coming back because you said something very uh, interesting that actually speaks to me a lot. You mentioned about, that product owners can actually focus actually on talking to the customers. And actually, it reminds me of a colleague of mine who was also like a CPO on one company, and he mentioned, a joke he once heard from, I think, investors that invested in his company that say that the product manager is a person who is standing, how to say, with the us, towards the company, right? So he wanted to say by this that he should be like a facing customers and show his back or his botox to the end of to the rest of the company. And actually, he always used to say that it's actually very bad situation when product manager is actually pulling into like discussions what laptops to buy for developers or what kind of projects in the backlog, blah 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 blah, because he's actually main responsibility is actually to be eyes and ears of the company. So we are actually not losing sort of touch with the market and with the dynamics, what's going with, like some kind of also intuition.
Yeah.
And also, it
Yeah.
was actually mine, where I remember my biggest, sort of strongest product managers on my teams that I managed before. It was also like those people who were like 70% of the time, either on fairs or visiting customers, going to some, I don't know, workshops, even helping marketing and sales sometimes, because it's such a big value of learning what are the needs and what people are asking about. Yeah, that I say that's actually, regardless of the sort of strategy and domain, I can see there is always the same team across the board that people says you need to be customer facing.
Yeah.
And they're just pulled too much into processes and like a sort of internal thing in the company, the things can go wrong, right? Because we don't talk to customers, right? I'm not sure if you agree with that.
Yeah. And it's so that's a luxury for us product people at Audiokinetic to have such a strong technical team that's been with us forever. Because if we're not monitoring everything they do every day, there's no problem. Like, they do the right thing a lot of times, so we can dedicate more time with the audience.
But I have
For
a
sure.
question to that. I have a still question to that, because I understand this. So they're just these sort of functional teams, right? But are there any, I don't know, project managers? So or just teams sort of? Oh yes,
So we
yes.
have project managers as well, of course,
Mhm.
doing that for the special projects team, for Wise development as well. We have our head of operation as well. That and they all
Okay.
do a fantastic job. Like, we're lucky to have really competent people doing that, because there's so many loose ends, and it's a really complex business and complex product. And to a certain point, just to give it, like, not only we distribute Wise, but it comes for many game developers, we have to also grant them access to the source code. because they may need to recompile it and so on, or they just want it as an insurance policy and so on. So, and our clients, so of course there's the sound designers, the music producer, but there's the programmers at the video game companies. And they're like, if you're in the real-time business, you're a really, good programmer in general, because it has to be runtime. It has to be super optimized. So we're selling Wise to hackers, basically, like to very smart people, and they must see our source code. And so now you're in a different relationship. Like, you cannot lie about your tech, right? They see it anyway. We distribute everything with it. So what is interesting, and that impacts the marketing, our approach to marketing. So we've never done marketing bullshit like, Wise is the best, or, because we're not in a position to do that. What we're communicating is exactly, we try to communicate what we bring, what we do, where we're at, with our strengths and with our weaknesses. And it's important to inform our users of the weaknesses, because if it's really important in certain areas for their game, they need to know in advance. And then we can plan around that and help them, find works around or things like that. Or they will develop something internally that will supplement what Wise is not providing as they want it, for example. So it's a game of honesty and a game of transparency and a game of communication, which is really different from the VST business and the DAW business, which is, right? They just try to upsell you anything they have.
They don't have to, people actually are so addicted, I think. I mean, I'm guilty of this, as well. I mean, I started to make music more professionally. I just learned that I just need guitar, keyboard, and actually skills rather than 20th or 60th VST plugin, right? Because because it's just like a replacement for something that for hard work. And but I think yes, that's like I would agree, yeah. But can I just dig more into this project management thing? Because since there are so many, so is there like any like a some kind of portfolio dashboard? Because I can see that there is a lot of projects, right? You have a like a launcher, you have of course core business, which is Wise, you have strata, special projects, you have R&D projects, you have launcher, everything has to be maintained, so is there any like a portfolio projects, like a dashboard that you track all those projects and see how those...
So to track the development of what we're doing, we're using Jira from Atlassian, which is quite common, at least in the video game space, but I think in software development in general as well. It's not the only product, but it's a popular one. So everything we do is tracked in Jira, and this is essential because any feature, anything you do in the code, may break something else. So we have to know what part of the code changed for what, who's done it, and
no, I got it. My question was more like now portfolio wise. So you have so many interacting, let's say, backlogs, right, that are happening at the same time. How to track such a complexity? I know that
it's still quite organic, because for example, we have 4 certifications. We can see those as products themselves, but they've been produced, and we update them maybe every second year, sometime every 3 years. So, and there's only 4. So it's something, and we have somebody responsible for education. So that person can manage that and manage the...
But that means it's like a separate backlog, like a separate project, or it's like a multiple projects, or
it's like separate projects. Yeah, we're separating that as different projects at that point in our system. The web team has its own space, for example, to do their thing. The launcher has its space as well, and they have their own release planning, and so the web team will be much shorter sprints and releases versus the launcher or Wise, and for sure. And Strata, we have a new collection every month. So, so that's a different type of cadence, and we're working with external partners. So that's a different, so that's why we have, a project manager for that thing and a product.
So, Simon, for sound, I know there were some sound designers listening to us. So, what sound designers, you've mentioned that it's like an open ecosystem, people can actually create. So is there any, what should we do, if somebody wants to become like a, like a sound designer, sort of working, uploading his content to Strata?
So we're not at a place where it's not an open thing at this point in time. So the idea was, so as Audiokinetic as a company, we always wanted content and so on. And when we were finally at a place where we said, okay, we can now start dedicating time, and we had the right idea with Strata as well. We needed that idea of distributing in multi-track, and that was a novelty. So we said, okay, with that novelty, because it gives you a lot of control, and Wise is all about control and refinement. So it's the same DNA as the rest of Wise, so that makes sense. So let's invest there. But we're a software company at heart, and trying to change Audiokinetic so that we are also an audio production company was not realistic. So we decided to work with partners outside. So all the content is developed by Boom Library, for example, and Spectraveler and other partners like Digital Rain, and there's new coming. So now there's a lot of content from Boom because that's been our first partner, and we kind of developed that together with them. But now we have a lineup of new customers. But why it's not open? It's because to make your sound Strata, and being Strata certified, it's not a real world, but the real thing. But
now I got it. Why it's called
like
Strata.
A lot of things, and that takes time to onboard and QA and back and forth. So that's why we're going basically, we're onboarding slowly new partners. So if you're interested, basically just get in touch with us, and then we'll start discussing. And if the content fits the Strata thing, like enough variations on the X and Y axis, for example, and complementary content, because we already have 45 collections, but do we need 5 collections on footsteps, for example? Maybe we don't, right? Sure. So just get in touch with me, and we'll start a discussion.
Great. Thank you, Simon. Simon, last, probably we'll need a little bit to go a little bit beyond the hour, because there's such a, so many questions. I can always say this, this hour is probably, we should do these webinars for such a long time. Longer time than just an hour. I would just wanted to touch one thing, which is sales and marketing, because you mentioned marketing. By the way, I'm also of course, rookie in Wise, but, I highly appreciate it. I'm a product manager myself, and, like a audio nerd. So, when I first got in touch with Wise, well-structured material, certification, etc. I say, I wish all products have such a, great onboarding experience, because in many domains, you have to, crack your head and actually smash it against the wall and say, especially, I know that maybe some simple SaaS applications, like a product-led growth where everything is just clickable and, you can learn, that's easy thing. But especially in audio, I always used to say that audio is just done especially for people who are, stubborn enough and, certain masochism, so they can do even like a traditional mastering and mixing, right? You need to master. I always miss great materials. But I just wanted to actually touch the point, so what is the relation, between, because I understand that also the way how you work with, your clients, the developers, game developers, and studios is very specific, because you need to, they need to actually integrate it to their specific, first of all, and game engine, right? And the, so, how is the relation between the product team and marketing team and sales team? Does, do product people are somehow involved in sales, or? That's, and also if sales also bring some ideas from, are they taking any part in maybe collecting requirements and, sort of?
They do. So the sales organization at Audiokinetic it's relatively classic, where, typically sales people will have a series of accounts. So in our case, game developers, and I'm mostly focusing on game because that remains our core business, but we still have LB and automotive and so on. And we have people dedicated for these markets. But let's say for game, so we have a few people responsible for that. They have their portfolio of developers, and of course they're interacting with them. So we have feedback from them, and you're using Slack, for example, or by email, and somebody from sales will say, I just had a discussion with developer XYZ. They were wondering about X, whatever thing. So there's that. In terms of product, if I go to a conference or something, what I like to do, so there's a conference, but I'm in a new city, for example. So I like to visit game developers. So sometimes it can be developers not using Wise, So now that becomes a discussion about, oh, are you interested in using Wise? What kind of games are you doing? Do you have some challenge? Can Wise be helpful for you? Sometimes the answer is no, right? but sometimes there are good candidates for that. So now I will play a role of pre-sales. I try to help them have a picture of, if they were to switch to Wise, what will they gain? What could they do differently? And also making sure that, okay, but they also need to be careful about maybe ABC elements, right? Because that's different, and it's always to be as clear as possible. So there's that. And then the marketing is about communication, and our marketing is, there's a fair amount of our marketing which is interacting with the community. And by that, what I mean, like, for example, I was referencing the blog article. So we have our people from marketing that will be in contact with somebody that has just released a game, and they've done something special with the music, for example. And then we'll contact them saying, hey, would you like to talk about that? Like, you're doing something very cool. And we have an audience of people that are reading those blog articles. And it's amazing how people are willing to share. And there's a great audience. Like, we have 20 or 30,000 people receiving, those blog articles. Not all of them read them all, but they're exposed to that. And some blog articles are really popular. And it's really fine when you at conference or different places, you meet people and they say, oh, I read that article and it's been so useful for my game. And you realize that, wow, this is so cool. Like, because that person in the United States wrote that thing, another person in the UK has been able to use it for, so there's that. So making sure that the community talks together and exchange, and we're translating the thing and so on, that's a big part of our marketing. And the other aspect is to present our product and try to surface, the benefits and things like that, that we also do. And for sure, a discussion with the product people is important, because again, it's really complex type of features that we have in Wise. So it's difficult for a marketing person to, understand all that and see what are the main features that are really important to communicate. So that's a team effort, basically.
Got it. The reason I asked was actually that because in the past I managed also a complex software product. This wasn't audio, and I just learned that while our community of customers was growing, the only way we could still sort of handle and understand needs of our customers was actually to use our sales team also as a extended product team, if you will, right? So they were actually bringing some great feedback from the potential customers. If we were sort of losing deals, they was asking, hey, so actually what's missing in our product, right? So what should we do? And our product team, we had sort of it was just a simple meeting between product team and sales team, and every second week, simple Excel sheet, so nothing fancy. And something before something went to Jira, then actually we had a discussion, like you mentioned, right? So can we put it, is it in line with our strategy, or maybe we can somehow negotiate when this potential client is important, but we cannot just simply completely go away from our strategy. So not sure if something similar happening in
So there is that, and depending on the developers. So some large companies, the salespeople will just interact with procurement, so they know nothing about doing games, audio or else. And some other companies, we will be interacting with the director of audio or the audio director, things like that. So now there are people still, in the trenches doing games, but they also manage the business aspect of licensing Wise, for example. So with this audience, there's much more feedback that sales can extract and then communicate back to us. And a lot of times sales would just say, oh, I don't know, Susan from that studio is interested to know about our roadmap or what we'll do there. And then we just organize a meeting and we spend an hour with that team to just show where we're at, where we're heading, and making sure that we will cover their needs in the future. Yeah.
We didn't deliver to the promise, which is actually leaving quarter for questions. But hopefully people are still there.
I'm still available. Yes, if people have questions, please.
Guys, so sorry for that. We haven't covered even half of what we wanted. So if you have any questions, please, share them now. So I have while we wait for questions, guys, just post questions. We'll try to answer them. What are like big trends in audio that you can see? That you like some things that you consider like in the market, Simon.
So, and again, my bias when I receive your question, my bias is real-time audio because that's where we're operating in. I believe like spatial audio, and this is a loaded term, spatial audio, because so there's the binaural aspect, and Apple with their spatial audio AirPods and things like that is really okay. This is to the point, so I'm there with you. So there's spatial audio, which is more the binaural aspect, and there is and we try to coin a new term now with Wise Acoustics, and this is using the geometry, to inform audio. So if you're in a small, of course, there's a reverb, for example. You're in a small room, you've got a short reverb. You go in a large room, you've got a large reverb. So we've done that forever. But now we try to do that by knowing exactly how is that geometry, like where are those walls and openings, and making a simulation of how sound travels with that. And this is, I think there's no turning back to that. Well, there's some games will not need it based on the gameplay, but if you do a game and it's a somewhat realistic environment, it's a 3D games, I think it really adds to the immersion and being engaged, and the suspension of disbelief. That's a popular expression in gaming. So this is really important in the future in general, and we've been investing, I don't know, the last 7-8 years, maybe 9 years now, that we are doing baby steps, improving on those things. And it has to be done in real time again. We still have our 10-20% of CPU max to do all that, to trigger hundreds of sounds and mix everything in real time, DSP, and your geometry and so on. Okay, so reading your question, is Wise the right tool to simulating realistic room acoustics that can be used for room design like theater? Okay, so our goal, because we are operating in the entertainment business, game is entertainment business, location-based entertainment. The word entertainment is in the acronym. So we design Wise, and we design all the Wise Acoustics features as well this way, where we've put you with a lot of controls, so that if you want to steer the acoustics in a specific way, you can do that. You want that super fantasy, like you're on a different planet with different laws of physics, you can go there. That said, if you want to do something realistic, and we've been starting to do some comparison with traditional tools, to do that serious work of room design, and Wise Acoustic, we're not so far from that. Like, we sound pretty close from those tools that only purpose is to recreate reality. So I'm not in a position to say, yes, use it, you're safe, because that's not the purpose. We don't have any, default setting that said this is reality per se. And it's not our focus. So that's why I cannot tell you, yes, it's because it's not made for that. But yes, you can make something that is really close from reality and really close from other tools that have that as a purpose. So that's the state of thing now. Where will we be in 5 years from now? Well, maybe we'll be in a position where we say, yeah, you can, if you have the actual geometry, what we simulate is 95% close to reality, for example.
Gotcha. Hopefully that's answered the question. Let me just read another one. Okay.
Okay. Do you have a creative team that acts as an internal users of your technology? Oh, yeah. How do you test early ideas? So that's a really good question. All right. Thank you for sending questions. Those are good questions. So we do not have a creative team because I don't think we would leverage them enough during the year. They would have to be part-time people or contractors. So what we do, it's to hire contractors by time to time. For example, in spatial audio and acoustic, that's what we were doing. When we had new versions of Wise, new tools, we have a sample that we maintain. And I had a friend of mine that's golden ears, and it's like he's really great at understanding what he hears. And every year, basically, was turning back. We were looking at a mix again. Things were changing because of the new features, and then we were reassessing. So that was one way of seeing where we're at. What we do as well is we send early access to our developers, or for example, beta version. At the moment, 24.1, which will release later this year, there's beta 2 available right now. And if you're interested, by the way, Wise is free for you to use. So just go on our website, you'll download the launcher, create a real profile with your real email address. That's the only thing we're asking. And then you can download Wise and you can start playing with it. You're only paying for Wise when you release an actual product out there. That would be meant. So what you're licensing is the right to release a product on one or multiple platforms. And even that, if it's a really small product, small project that you're working on with small budget, it might be free for you. If you do a nonprofit kind of thing, that will be free for you as well. So it's quite open for that kind of thing. So that's how we will do that. And our product manager will also, as we develop things, we will have some focus groups sessions that we organize. And so we'll have them. And when it's really early on, we only share, like we manipulate the screen and the features and we ask for feedback because it's not solid enough. It's really early prototyping. And then later we'll do other focus groups where they are manipulating Wise. And typically we will do that as task-based. We'll say, okay, execute this task. And we record the screen and we see how many clicks it took and how many detour maybe they had to take, or how many times we had to help them so that they arrive to the destination. And that will inform how ready and mature this thing is or not, basically. So
that's so cool. That's so cool you're saying, because, sometimes I get the question from some colleagues in the audio industry that, how do you do market research, how you do the the idea testing, right? So that's I think need to point them out to the webinar, say, hey, this, you need to listen to this. That's so cool.
It's a good thing. It's not something we've done since the beginning of Wise, but since we've started doing it, there's no turning back. Like it's sometimes it's brutal. Like you do something and you watch people using your thing and you say, oh my God, how wrong were we thinking that this would work? So it's brutal, but you get an honest feedback about the quality of what you created.
That's great. That's true. So let's take another one.
Oh, okay. What, according to you, is an area within Wise where machine learning AI is especially useful? How are you approaching integration of machine learning in the ecosystem? Okay, another interesting question. So, developing the models, the big thing, that's not at our reach. This is Google and Facebook, and it takes millions of dollars and huge machine to arrive with those things. So we're not there, of course. But with what's available, with those models that exist out there, of course, we're starting exploring, what we can do with that. Areas where this could be useful, in our case, it's, sound reproduction, for sure. Or, for example, when I was talking about strata, I said we have at least 6 variations of sounds and layers and so on. Well, could AI help us creating more variations of those sounds, right? You provide them with a bank of things. Or just when you're assembling and you're designing new sounds, could there be ways where you say, okay, I need things like this or that, and then you get your thing. So we're exploring those kind of things. And when we say we, tons of other companies are exploring the same thing. For spatial audio, one hurdle is to set the geometry. Because when I was talking about Wise acoustics, we're using the actual geometry. We are not using the visual geometry of the gain. Because typically there's just too many triangles and too many details for audio. So the cost of computing audio with that complex geometry would be just too much. And anyway, audio is needs way less triangles and things to generate something that is like real life, that is plausible. And a lot of time we've got problems with visual where, let's say you have a ceiling and you have your wall, and there might be a gap between the two, but you won't see it visually. But there is a gap for audio. And all of a sudden, instead of having your sound bouncing, your sound goes across the room and you don't understand why. And there's tons of problems with using the visual geometry. So you have to create your audio geometry. That is a much simpler thing, but that may mean that you have a person that is in front of a church, for example, so the visual is there, but then you have to make your low poly level of detail. So you have your low count or your low polygon, geometry for that. So that takes a lot of time when you have, huge worlds and so on. So could machine learning understand, oh, this is a church and I need to make a simple model that is efficient for audio? That will save weeks or months or years for a team that invests into the wise acoustics aspect of things. So that's another field, for example. But again, it's or anything that is of assistance. Like the interactive music feature set in Wise is really rich, but what is tedious for a composer? So writing music for a composer, this is the fun thing, right? And you do your main theme and so on. What is difficult for a composer, or not difficult, but tedious, is, okay, now you have a music, let's say music A, and that music at any given moment can transition to music B, C, D, E, F, G, H, Y. So now you need little music segments that go gracefully between A and that portion, and then your music A, you're at the beginning, the middle, the end of the music. It might be different music transition that you need to go to B, C, D, E. So that's tons of little bits and pieces of music that you have to write, and that's not creative. Your music theme, you've done it already as a composer, and now you spend months doing those little clips. Can machine learning understand that and create most of those variations without the manual intervention of the programmers, of the composer, I mean. So yeah, things like that. But have we cracked the nut of that? Do we have a product available for that? No, not yet. We're still experimenting with this.
All right. One more.
You're full of questions. Thanks. Can you talk about how R&D fits into your team's product development process? That's an interesting question. Yeah. Is R&D done in pursuit of products already on the roadmap, or is R&D conducted independently to open new product opportunity not yet envisioned?
Very cool question. Thank you.
That's a good one. And it's like if you had inside information from Audiokinetic. So for the longest time at Audiokinetic, the R&D team was heavily shifted toward the D, right? A glimpse of research, mostly development, because we needed plugins to be released, or we needed some things, so they were mostly, participating in developing Wise and its plugins in there. And that's something, if you keep that pattern, then there's no innovation really possible, because you don't spend enough time in actual research and see things emerging, right? So that's why we separated the R&D team from the Wise Acoustics team as well, because this is more product oriented and it has to be optimized and easier to use and so on. And we have more research. It's called the R&D team, but we try to have this team doing more actual research, so that, yes, we can arrive with new opportunities and, things that, we were not expecting this result, but maybe there is something to do with that. Let's have a development team to take that and maybe do a product out of the R&D teams at that point. So that's where we're heading. Do we have the perfect balance? It's better and better. But do we have the perfect balance yet? I'm not sure. But yeah, we're closer to that. But it took a lot of time to arrive there, and you need to arrive to a certain level of maturity, maybe, because at the beginning you have to make sales and you have to interest people. Otherwise, you have to, shut down the company or let go. So that's why I think it was just responsible for us to be heavy steered on the development more than the research. Now we're in a position where we can afford more research, but it's relatively recent. So I'm eager to see the kind of fruits that it will bear.
If I can just, Jim, that was, great question. I just wanted to say that that's exactly what will be a subject of this course that we are doing together with Tomasz Żernicki, in the end of September. It's exactly how to structure your portfolio of projects, right? How much of R&D, how much of platform projects, etc. So how to, sort of take the best out of your, sort of, say, how to do a lot with as little as you have, right? Because we product people know that we always have, right, too little of, we could do, there's always great ideas and requests from the customers and some research project that we can do. By the way, I also see that a lot of companies are actually taking the other path, right? I know there are people who are researchers, and actually they try to commercialize the research, and actually they have the challenge, actually, especially that I went recently to Superbooth, to Berlin, etc. I can see there is a lot of people, who have to still learn that they have to be more focused on development, actually maybe going faster to the market, right? But you can always, like you know what I'm trying to say. I'm like a former, like academic, for example, who's doing acoustic research, and then he's just building company very slowly, right? So that was like a completely different path to. And I was just for sort of looking, and somebody was giving me a demo of the product and say, hey, it's like in my opinion, over engineered. It could be like already launched on the market. And I said, oh no, we have like another year or two to be, to be developing this. And I say, oh gee, it's just too. Oh, we have still another one. Oh, we have so many questions.
All right, cool. Do you think the lines between technical game audio skills versus user-generated content would blur in the future, similar to what is happening with making music with AI tools that now allows everybody to make music in seconds? So that's a good question. Or would game audio continue to be complex enough to tackle? Yes, that's for sure. But how would you gauge such an idea for product? Okay, so developing game is getting to, in a certain sense, in a certain way of looking at things, it's getting simpler as we go, because now we have tools, we've got more and more people educated and, with experience in that thing. So there's more and more, we know more how to do games. It remains super complex. And the fact is that every game needs to innovate to a certain extent. And they push the barrier of graphic and interaction and sound every time. So it keeps the challenge really high constantly. So will we arrive at a point where you can have non-professional contributing to a game and have that seamlessly integrated with the rest of the content? I don't know. Maybe. Probably, but how many decades before we get there? That I don't know. And I choose decade as there. For sure, in the next 10 years, we won't be in a position where anybody can contribute to a game, and professional assets developed by professionals versus anybody else will just blend correctly. But eventually, maybe we'll get there. What is difficult is we already have examples of that. So some of the games out there can be mod, and there's a modding community. And some of the games using Wise, for example, the developer will expose the full Wise project to the modding community. So we've got people now learning Wise because they want to add sounds to something they added to the game, for example. So that's great. But now, what is a good sound in a game? It's always like there's not one. For example, if it's a weapon sound, okay, a modder just created a new weapon and you need a weapon sound that fits with that weapon. A good weapon sound, there's not one good weapon sound, right? It depends on the context. It depends on the rest of what's around it, the type of music, other sound effects, the type of dynamic mixing and all that. And now, with all these constraints, that will lead you to say, okay, I need to compress it more or less. I need frequency in that range to be well heard, but I will cut other frequencies so that it fits well with the rest of the content. That requires experience. That requires, some knowledge to arrive there. So, and I'm not expecting every modder to get that knowledge, because they just need a sound with their new guns they design, and they're mostly a visual artist maybe. So by themselves, that's difficult. Now, can AI in the middle understand all that and take a raw sound from the contributor and make it fit with the context of the game? Yeah, maybe we'll arrive there eventually. But when? The question is more about when. But probably not in the next decade, I think.
That's interesting question. That's interesting question. I mean, regarding the music, I watched I think today or yesterday, what is the name of this very famous producer and vlogger who says, that he's actually, I think his son or daughter, when he just played some songs from Sun or Udio, says, why you listening to AI? So he says, I cannot recognize it. But, there are people who can still, very clearly recognize that it's obviously going to probably change very quickly. They're still learning those algorithms, etc.
Yeah.
But he says, that's kind of, there are people who can actually 10 in 10 recognize which is, still AI, which I mean, probably I wouldn't be able, and I would say like semi-professionally make music. So, I should be able to recognize. Yeah.
So I think, I don't know. I think music produced by AI, well, it was really bad not so long ago, and it's like Suno is a good example of something quite decent coming out of that, and that goes at a much faster pace, and dialogue as well, like imitating human voice. It's really interesting what we can do with that now. The quality is incredible. So yes, soon enough that will be good enough. I believe it's mostly when you talk about sound effects where it's so much more abstract, and it depends on a lot of other things. And a sound effect, like music in isolation, you can take a music in isolation and play it, right? And it makes sense, and you arrange it until it's pleasant and it works. Sound effects in isolation, just one sound doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you put it with all the other sounds, without dialogue and without the music, well, it's still a mess of ambient sound, of foreground sounds, so it's much more abstract. So I think it's going to take a bit more time to get something convincing out of that.
Wow, we have such a great discussion. By the way, guys, I just pasted another link which can be interesting for you. There is actually on Facebook group for audio and music tech product managers. So it's a closed group just for people who actually really build audio products. By the way, Simon is there as well, so you can actually touch him, some ideas and talk personally to him. There are also a lot of other people from renowned audio companies. So that's maybe actually interesting in it if you are into building audio products. Jesus, there is such a great discussion. But I don't know. Do we have any more questions until we wrap up? Because we really went far beyond an hour, but I think it was worth it. So, guys, one more question, another last question.
Maybe we're good. Maybe we did a good job after all.
Simon, thank you so much. That's that was really great to meet you and talk to you.
Thanks for inviting me again. It was a nice discussion and a new type of discussion for me as well. So that's quite cool.
Yep. So guys, to everyone who watched, thank you so much for listening to us. Sorry that we went, I warned you from the beginning that we can go over, these subjects are interesting. Have a good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are, and take care.
See you in the future somewhere. Bye-bye, everyone.